This is Happiness Solved with America's happiness coach, Sandy Scarlatta.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's episode. I am so happy you're here. So I recently had an amazing opportunity to talk about this topic on live TV. And I think that it's a timely thing to start my podcast with. And it's basically reset and de-stress. So, stress is still a huge factor in today's world. And it is such a major problem that is affecting people both mentally and physically. According to the American Psychological Association, stress affects all systems of the body. That's right. Every major system of our body, it can be affected by stress. Now, WebMD reported that 43% of all adults suffer adverse health effects from stress, like high blood pressure, skin conditions, depression, and anxiety. And 75 to 90% of all doctor's office visits are for stress-related ailments and complaints. That number is staggering. So I always like to say, at any time during the day, you can press the reset button, right? And reset your day, just like you reboot your computer when it's not functioning properly. So here are my 5 tips to reset your day and help you reduce stress. Step 1 is exercise, right? Exercise is going to raise your endorphins. It's going to get your heart rate up, and that is going to help you reduce your stress. So take a walk in nature, dance to your favorite music, ride a bike, anything that you enjoy doing is going to help reduce your stress. Step 2, gratitude. Every day when you wake up, make a list of everything you have to be grateful for. And at any time during the day when you need to reset your day, focus on your blessings and feel its loving embrace. You will be amazed at how quickly you will feel better. Tip 3, deep breathing. All you need to do is take 10 slow, deep breaths in through your nose and out through your mouth. Okay? This is also an amazing way to reduce your anxiety. Tip number 4, grounding or earthing. So this just simply means taking off your shoes outside and feeling the grass or the earth beneath your feet, right? This is energizing and balancing for your emotions. So imagine yourself walking on the beach, if you've ever experienced that, right? The sun's shining, you've got a breeze blowing, you hear the sound of the ocean, but what's really happening is that your feet are touching the earth. That's why it feels so great. So just take off your shoes and walk on the grass. You don't have to go to the beach. And the last step, number 5, is trust. Learn to trust that everything is going to work out exactly as it's supposed to, right? It always does. And I always like to add to that, if you can control a situation, then there's nothing to worry about because you have control over it. If you can't control a situation, then there's no need to worry about it because it's something that is completely out of your control. So I hope you enjoyed these tips, and I hope you enjoyed today's episode. So my interview today is with Max Reif. Max has such a wealth of information, and he shares this incredible journey that he has been on for decades now. And I certainly learned a lot, and I hope you do as well. Hey, Max, how are you today? Thank you so much for joining me.
Yeah, great to be here, Sandy.
Yeah, so you're on the West Coast.
Uh-huh.
Sounds like a beautiful area. You're outside of San Francisco, you said?
Yeah, it's nice. I'm across the bay from San Francisco and then about 10 miles inland from Oakland and Berkeley. Gets a little hot here, but in the summer sometimes, but it's very nice much of the year.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, the weather's incredible. So as I told you, I'm outside of Washington, D.C., and we go from beautiful, no humid days for about a week or two, and then it's just hot and humid.
Yeah, I've been there. Yeah.
Yeah. So it gets kind of nasty here. So have you been out there your whole life?
No, I was born in New York City in, 1948. That sort of puts my age out there for people who can do arithmetic. And my family moved to St. Louis, Missouri when I was about 3, and I grew up there in a suburb of St. Louis and have been kind of all over the place since then, although I have been in 1998 or 99, it was actually, I was drawn back out here where I'd lived before by a female friend whom I had connected with on a spiritual, listserv on the internet, and who's now my wife, and just went to bed having had a late night reading and stuff.
Wow. So tell me about yourself. What brought you to where you are today?
It's a very complicated story. When I was in my early 20s, I was feeling, I was kind of a parent's kid. I was like the racehorse in our family that they had all their money on, and they really kind of doted on me. And then when I went away to college and didn't have that support, I started really slowly falling apart. And 2 or 3 years into that, I had read books by Alan Watts and Aldous Huxley about psychedelics, was realizing that I seemed to have some problems inside. And I was in Sarasota, Florida, at an experimental college called New College that I had just transferred to that year. And I decided I would either go to a therapist or take LSD, whichever I could access first. And the very next day I was in a park and I passed this hippie saying, "Sunshine Acid, just back from the West Coast, $5 a hit."
Oh my gosh.
And I bought some and I put it in my wallet, wondering if I would ever take it. And then the next week, a guy I knew at college said, hey, want a trip? So I put this little pill in my mouth and washed it down. And, my life began unraveling, although over the years, it became evident that I had had some traumas early on not that I wasn't aware of them on some level, but that I was so fortified against facing that I wouldn't look at them. And over the years, I later became, a couple years through this, I had I'll say mystical experience. It was rather sudden, and there's a much longer story to it. But I experienced visiting a friend in his office. He had been a campus radical who'd become an advertising man within 2 years, and I'd been visiting Chicago, where I'd first gone to school at Northwestern, and I had been avoiding him because he had changed so much in the past couple of years. But he had called me just before I was about to leave town, and asked me if I'd stop by to say hi to him. So I went up to his office in the Prudential Building in downtown Chicago, and he came out into the reception area on the 26th floor. I think it was the Leo Burnett Agency, a big agency in Chicago. It may still be there. And he took me back to the tiniest personal office I'd ever seen, and gave me a hug and motioned for me the only other chair besides his chair behind the desk in this tiny office. And I sat down facing him, and behind him, there was a big poster of this young, long-haired, bearded, and mustached man. And the poster said, "I am the Ancient One." And under that, it said, "I was Rama, I was Krishna, I was this one, I was that one, and now I am Meher Baba." And Meher Baba was an Eastern mystic that I had heard of because a year or two before, I'd been walking to breakfast at New College one day during the period when I was doing the acid, before I really broke down. And a friend of mine joined me to walk to the cafeteria, and he was like walking while he was carrying a New York Times that he was reading as he walked. You know, he had the whole thing, one side in one hand and the other hand, and I don't see how he could see, but he was walking. And he said, as we walked, he said, "Oh, here's an interesting article. There was this man who lived in India and didn't speak and said he was God, and he was silent most of his life, and he said he would speak before he died, and he just died, and his name was Meher Baba." So I had heard that name, and then I had not known really very much about Meher Baba. I had occasion to a friend who'd been traveling and stopped at my parents' house when I was living there in St. Louis, when I was back home, had a book of Meher Baba's discourses in his backpack, and I asked to look at it. And I just, I turned to the discourse on love, because I knew that love was what I sorely needed. And I tried to read it, and it was just like, almost like veiled, I guess. I was going to say like Greek, but I could understand the words. I just couldn't really, it didn't compute. So I found myself in this office in Chicago with this old friend we had been sort of radicals, he was a campus radical leader, and I was sort of in the group at Northwestern. And he had left town for a while. Well, he'd won the this is so many details. Am I going into too much detail?
No, it's perfect.
Okay. Oh,
I
great.
love it.
Okay.
No, it's great.
Okay. This fellow had run for student president at Northwestern on a radical ticket. It was a very, if you know anything about Northwestern, it was a very conservative university. And this fellow was having, he called them bitch-ins, demonstrations at this big campus landmark called The Rock every day as part of his campaign. And he would climb to the top of this rock with a bullhorn and start to air grievances against the university, invite anybody else who had grievances to come up there. And every day he would lead a march through the city of Evanston with people carrying signs for open housing. There was a lot of redlining going on, and they were protesting that. And I actually, it leads into another story I won't tell here. I got beat up by a campus security guard, not really beaten up, but roughed up. And my ego was severely bruised. And so I went up to the top, to the rock, and told my story, and everybody cheered. That was how I first got to know this fellow. And he won the election for student president back in 1960, I think 68. And then during the summer break, the university sneakily sent him a letter when most people were off campus saying, you won the election, but you're disqualified from taking office because you didn't finish a summer school course once.
Oh, goodness.
And he was just too disgusted at that point, too disillusioned, and he left town. And he had stayed with my roommate and I for a few weeks before he left town. And about 6 weeks after he left, we had received a postcard from him written on a beach in Mexico. And it said beautiful picture of this beach, but on the other side it said, truth is metaphysical, not political. And that was all we heard from him. Then I began hearing rumors. I can't even remember how I heard them. I heard that he had ended up in Berkeley, California, and he'd gotten married to this lady who supposedly was a witch in a past life. I don't know how anybody ever sent that rumor. I don't know who said that, but somebody said it. And he had become a devotee of this man, Meher Baba, whom I'd heard of and whose book I'd tried to read. So now when I was back visiting Chicago in it was like early 71, and I had in the meantime had a nervous breakdown and thought my life was over because the LSD combined with my things coming up from the inside of me that I wasn't able to face. I just broke down. It was too much for me. And I'd been holding on to it so tightly so I didn't have to face it. And I was asked by my parents to go to a psychiatrist, and he started giving me antidepressant pills, which people had not heard of those at that time in life. At least I hadn't in the world. And finally, after he was very meticulous and scientific, after trying a number of them, he gave me stronger and stronger pills. And this one finally just gave me all the energy that I hadn't had for a year during my breakdown. And he gave me the science of it, I don't know how to say it, what he believed was the science, that it was very complicated. You have had a chemical depression because your body was inhibiting the chemical which inhibits something or other. And this pill was supposed to inhibit the inhibitor, and that's why it gave me back my energy. I believed that. I didn't have anything else to believe at the time. I mean, it was a bit suspect because seemed so unlikely, his explanation, and the implication that humankind knew so much about the brain and consciousness. But the pill gave me energy, and I just said, okay, I'm better now. And I went on the basis of all the energy I had. It was too much to be contained in the one city, my hometown where I was living, St. Louis. And I drove up to Chicago to visit old friends. And everywhere I would go to visit my old friends, I spent a couple weeks just having dinner with people and playing music and stuff. I played some guitar and banjo. All the families I would visit, they would take me through their book room or their office or study. And there would always be a book on a shelf about Meher Baba that they would point out to me. And they'd say, this fellow, his name was Ellis. Ellis dropped this by. And then we would, instead of ever talking about what the book said or anything, I don't know if anybody even read the books, we would all talk about how eccentric Ellis was, how he'd been a radical 2 years before. Now he was an advertising man. One girl said, I saw him on TV selling laundry detergent. You don't want to have anything to do with him. So visiting all my friends, I avoided Ellis. I had succeeded in avoiding him for the whole 2 weeks I was staying in Chicago. I was I was going to leave in a day or so. First of all, when I had this dream that was much more real than my waking life. I won't go into it because it would take too long. But I didn't even know there could be such things. And then I fell back asleep, I think. And then the next I knew, one of the girls I was staying with said, there's a phone call for you. And I gave me the receiver and I said, hello. And this voice said, hi, this is Ellis. And it was this guy I'd been avoiding. And he had caught up with me. And I realized as the years went by, it probably took a bit of courage for him to call me because, he probably got wind of the idea that I was avoiding him because I hadn't called him. And so he said, I heard you're in town. I heard you're doing very well, and I'm really so happy to hear it. And I'd love it if you just come down to my office just to say hi before you leave town. And his voice was so natural. There was nothing eccentric about it. I just felt very comfortable talking with him. And I said, sure, I'll come by tomorrow morning. So I got on the L train, the rapid, I don't know how rapid, it's fairly rapid transit, I guess. And went downtown, and I got on the elevator at the Prudential Building, and the lobby of we were already told this part. He took me into his office, and I was sitting in the chair. Okay. So I made up the ground of what I wasn't going to say. And now you have the whole picture of how I got there. So I'm just sitting there facing him, and I see this picture behind him, this big poster, I Am the Ancient One. It was on yellow newsprint paper. It was put out by a guy in Berkeley that I know now. And beautiful doe-eyed picture of Meher Baba when he was probably in his 20s still, in long hair, beautiful, luxurious long hair, and sort of a wispy beard and a big mustache. And I realized for the first time now, I said to myself, I guess, I'm facing somebody who, if I ask him questions about Meher Baba, I can actually get answers. So these questions started coming out of my mouth that I hadn't prepared for. And but it was like, I don't know, they were so spontaneous. And I said, does this man really say he was God? And Ellis said, well, Meher Baba says everybody and everything is God, but there are only a very few people who are conscious of their divinity. And those are the ones who can really help others. And then I asked, I didn't even have to think. Without missing a beat, I asked, well, there may have been a couple other questions, but then I asked soon after, the important question to me, why shouldn't I follow Christ or Ramakrishna? Now, Ramakrishna was a great mystic who lived in the late 1800s near Calcutta. There's a wonderful book called The Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna. One of his disciples had a photographic memory and wrote down like 1,600 pages of the master's. It's like a play. It reads like a play. His dealings with other people who came to visit. It's a phenomenal book. I didn't read it until several years later, but I had read a part of a book about Ramakrishna. And I said, why shouldn't I follow Ramakrishna or Christ? And I had been reading Thomas Merton because when you have a breakdown, I think it's sort of second nature to start searching however you're able to. And so exactly. I've been reading a little bit of mysticism. So the question that popped out of my mouth was, why shouldn't I follow Christ or Ramakrishna? I'd been raised Jewish, but I like Thomas Merton. So my friend said, that's when he said, now, Meher Baba says that there's a being called the Avatar, which is like the world messenger. And there are various names, the name Christ or Buddha, or in Islam, they use the word Rasul sometimes. And he comes to earth, and this is not the teaching of Orthodox Christianity or Islam, but this is what Meher Baba said. He comes to earth approximately every 700 to 1400 years when people start to forget what we're really doing here. In recorded history, he's come millions of times. Apparently, they say, the masters of wisdom say there have been millions of cycles, millions of Earths. I don't even know the numbers. In Hindu time reckoning, they have the concept of a kalpa, which is, I think, 4.3 billion years or something like that. They see things in these vast epical terms. But anyway, Ellis, my friend, said, in recorded history, the Avatar has come, Baba said, as Zoroaster, Rama, Krishna, Buddha, Jesus, and Muhammad, and that Meher Baba said he is that same ancient one who comes again and again. And I thought, and at a certain point, I may have asked a couple other questions, but at a certain point, he had answered all my questions with simple factual answers according to what Meher Baba had said. They weren't his answers. They were actually Meher Baba's answers that he was relaying. And my mind just rested for a little. I didn't have any more questions. And I just sat there I feeling like something was going to happen, but I had no idea what. And then out of my mouth popped this other question that I didn't even know I was going to verbalize. I said, where is he now? Because Meher Baba, the first thing I had learned about Meher Baba was that he had died. That had been on January 31st, 1969. And I was walking to breakfast on February 1st, I think, where my friend read me the newspaper article. So I said, where is he now? Because, the thought I had was so it sounded like he was a really great man, but if he's dead, what's the difference? So that was why I asked the question. And I waited for my friend to answer that question as adroitly and articulately as he'd answered all the others. But as I looked across at him, he was just smiling. And I kept waiting, and he just kept smiling. And he never said a word, and I just wondered what was going on. And then I started feeling something that I rapidly lost the capacity to ever be able to describe in words, but it was an experience in some respects of the oneness that Meher Baba and all the other mystics, for that matter, describe. This oneness that there's only one being in the universe. And this atmosphere, which seemed to fill the room and perhaps everything else too, it had a sort of a pinkish ambiance. I don't think I saw anything visually that was pink, but it had that kind of ambiance. And later I learned that Meher Baba often wore pink Indian sadra, and the color pink is kind of associated with what we call Baba's love. And it was as though he was actually in the room. Whatever he is, he's beyond anything we can conceive. From, if you imagine what God was in the room with me and saying, this is our introduction. This is who I am. I am this love that you're feeling now. And as I began learning about Baba later, I would read time and again how in different ways he would tell different people, I'm not this body that you see. It's only a coat that I put on. And when I die, so to speak, I've just taken off my coat, but I'm still everywhere and in everything. And he also said he would be especially accessible for the next, I believe it's the next 100 years, possibly a little more than that. So that's been my guiding star it's been, incredibly, it's been 50 years now.
Wow.
I've been focusing on this man, or whatever, looking through his eyes to whatever, as in his pictures, to whatever, he really is beyond those eyes, to whatever depth there really is, and praying to that depth, which other people call by other names, and some people don't call it by any name. In Buddhism, there's no recognition. It's a non-theistic spiritual system that doesn't use the word God, but they have the same concepts of ultimate reality that I guess they call it nirvana. Yeah, so 50 years focusing on Meher Baba. And I've been to his, they call it his samadhi, where he's buried in India 6 times over all those years. And he has a center in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, a beautiful 500-acre wildlife center and retreat right on the ocean. It's actually in Myrtle Beach, in the area. It's North Myrtle Beach. With virgin forest. It's just a wonderful place. And I lived there for a number of years. You don't live on the center, but I lived in the community there for several years. And so that's been kind of I think whatever question you asked, that was the answer to it.
I just wanted to hear your story.
Yeah.
I wanted to hear your story. Yeah.
Yeah, that's the biggest story, I guess, in my life. I have other big stories. That wasn't the one I was planning to tell today when the people at the Mindful Word asked me if there was something I would, might want to be interviewed about. But that's the one that came out, and that's fine too.
No, I love it. I love it because I'm not familiar with any of that. And, and I love learning new things. So what do you do today?
You mean I suppose you mean in general, not just in general. Saturday.
Yeah. So you got on this journey. So what has that led you to?
Well, lots and lots of things, but I always was kind of challenged professionally because the skills that I had or thought I had didn't fit into any real niche unless So I liked writing, and I would write. I was shortly after this Baba experience, I began experiencing a lot of inspiration. And a few years later in my life, some of the stuff from my childhood came up even more powerfully, and I had another breakdown. And I worked, and Ram Dass, I wrote this letter to Ram Dass, who I didn't know from Adam, and he wrote me this beautiful letter back. That's a whole other story. It could be a whole other interview. And he took away a lot of the shame that was left over from my childhood. And I feel like you could say Baba was working through him, that he was a helper. And so since then, there's been a lot more inspiration, and I've done a lot in the arts, a lot of poetry and writing prose stories as well as poetry and essays for the Mindful Word, and became a painter at a certain point and began writing songs, or, which another thing, I knew a little bit about musical scales since I'd been forced to take piano lessons as a child, but I never dreamed that I could write songs. But after these experiences, they just started popping out. And I have put out a couple CDs. That inspiration, or whatever it is, hasn't been as accessible the last few years, but there's some beautiful. I recently actually recorded an album in Myrtle Beach with a friend named Cliff Hackford, who's like a master producer, and it's a great. I'm so happy with the album. I feel like it's what Baba wanted from me, and I'm just overjoyed that I connected with this great man to put my songs in the settings they deserved. So anyway, finally, after knocking around various jobs, delivery courier and supermarket checker and what I don't know. I was once a literary assistant for a writer who had been a painter who'd gone blind. That's a whole other story too. But I work at a preschool now. There's a school called the Maher School in Lafayette, which is the next suburb over from where I live. It's been around for about 45 years now. And it was opened by a group named Sufism Reoriented, which is a group that's dedicated to Meher Baba. And somehow when I moved back out here 20 some years ago, I was a delivery courier. And then in the one of the recessions that went on, somehow like the internet bubble burst or something, and there wasn't as much delivery business. And I asked the teacher, the head of the Sufis, which I was part of that organization for a while, if he had any ideas for a job I could do. And he asked me to come to the school, and it seemed to be a good fit. And I enjoy working with children, and it's nice to have something I can do that's useful and get paid for, and to be able to hold the same job for 20 years. So, and I do my music there. I have a CD of children's songs too, and read stories and just work with the children in various ways. So that's what I do for my livelihood now. I'm down to 4 hours a day now. The school was, we cut back. We couldn't have as many people during the pandemic and many students. So we had smaller classes, and I wasn't needed. I had been working 6 hours the last few years. I'm happy at my age working 4 hours a day, and we'll see where it goes from there.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm on vacation now, which is nice. Okay. Yeah.
That's awesome. Yeah. That's awesome. Wow. So your CD that you put out, what kind of music is it? How would you describe that?
Well, it's I'm a baby boomer, and my influence are Bob Dylan and Leonard Cohen, people like that. I guess whatever I imbibed from my musical influences, started coming out of me. And then there were some very inspired singers devoted to Meher Baba who began using the rock idiom and writing spiritual songs for Baba, that really good rock and roll songs. They're just spiritual songs of devotion or joy. And so it's sort of a folk rock style. Let's see, there's the first song on the album that Cliff got these wonderful musicians who do solos in between the verses and stuff. And I'm just so thrilled with one guy named John Ware. I just love the way he plays guitar improvisations. The first song it's called Sweet Intoxication, and it's based on an experience I had. I don't remember the circumstances, except that I was waiting for a bus outside of the San Francisco Library back in the 80s when I had lived in the Bay Area. I lived in San Francisco for a while. And it was just a feeling of joy, of inspiration that came from what a beautiful day it was, I guess. And a feeling of intoxication. The song's called Sweet Intoxication, and it starts. I'll just sing a few lines. Sweet intoxication. I can't wait. I can't get. Sweet intoxication fills my little heart. I knew that it would be this way. I knew it from the start. When I walk beside you, everything is new. Sweet intoxication from walking next to you. And then it goes on. And there were all kinds of
Nice.
things. Yeah, they were all different. And some of the songs were just surprises. I didn't know I could write a song. And after I worked with Ram Dass, and he pretty much just removed a lot of the shame that had been consciously or half consciously inside me since certain things that happened in my childhood and that had severely inhibited me. And it led to my just telling him. He would sometimes, I had read it before I connected with him, and this was in 1976 when I worked with him. He would say to people, whatever it is that you can't tell me, go ahead and tell me. And I had reached a point where I felt I had to talk about this stuff that had never been able to talk about. And I had written to him not knowing anything from him. You know, I'm going to go a little more into this because it was so inspiring what he sent back to me. I think I wrote him, and this was 5 years after I had this Meher Baba experience, but there was just a lot of stuff that still needed to be stirred up and burned. And a lot of it got burned, but with Ram Dass's help. But when I wrote to him, I was looking, let's see, I just wrote him a note that said something like, Dear Ram Dass, is there such thing as eternal damnation because I feel my soul is ruined? And it was that bad during this period. It was so intense, all the stuff that came up and all the shame and all the things I couldn't talk about and a lot of sexual stuff too that I don't like to talk about in public explicitly because it freaks other people out. But I've dealt with a lot of it inside myself by God's grace and with help of people like Ram Dass. And he wrote back a few weeks later. I got a message, a letter from him written in ink on a little piece of notepaper. It said, Dear Max, your soul is not ruined and there is no damage to your thought or feeling whatever. Psychologically, you may be a mess, but spiritually, you are going to God. In order to go to God, you have to get all the shit inside you opened up. Why not come visit with me in New York City? It shouldn't take more than a couple of hours for starters. If you can't come to New York, just write me in more detail about your scene and we'll work by letter. Just be totally honest, open, and I forget the other word, true or something. Then he said, God loves you and will show you as soon as you begin to love yourself. Blessings surround you, except your own beauty, Ram Dass.
Wow.
Yeah, so it turned out he was coming to Oklahoma City on a lecture tour in a few weeks, which is much closer to St. Louis, and I felt a lot safer going just 300 miles to Oklahoma City. And I took a plane down there and went to his talk. And then the next morning I had an appointment and went to his motel room. And he just said, Max, what are you thinking about? And I just started pouring out all of the stuff that I was ashamed of and had never been able to talk about. And then he said, what else? And I poured out some more stuff, I guess. And then he said, he would say, with this big voice straight from his heart. And finally, then he began saying, I love you, when he began seeing me more, I guess. And he was rewarding me, in other words, for my honesty instead of not just for saying what was expected or what was safe for other people to hear. And he could handle it all. And finally, in about 10 minutes of this, I just looked, I was so lost in the process of being with him. And I finally looked at myself and I realized it's all gone. All the shit that I had been drowning in for the last 6 months was just gone without a trace. And we were sitting there like just two rays of the sun. And then for the next 6 months, he became kind of like a second father for me. I would phone him every week or so and write to him, and I got to visit him twice in various places and went to a retreat that he was sponsoring, and I've been very fortunate in this. And then I also later learned, I had heard for years that Meher Baba had said once, Ram Dass is mine. Richard Alpert is mine. Richard Alpert was his given name, of course. And I could never substantiate it until finally I did. I met somebody who was told by one of Meher Baba's close disciples that this fellow had been a friend of Ram Dass. Maybe that's why he was told that. This disciple told him, Baba wants you to know. Baba wasn't in the body anymore, but I guess he felt Baba wanted this fellow to know. Meher Baba had said one time, Richard is mine. And I felt, I already had felt Baba was working through Richard throughout Ram Dass. Of course, I have another friend who was fortunate enough to meet Meher Baba several times when he was a child. And he told a story about the first time he was waiting to go into the room to meet Meher Baba, this man whom his mother and his aunt, who were devotees of Baba's, had become devotees. This man they had told him was God, and he didn't know what to expect. So he went in the room, and Baba was just sitting there alone. Very few people ever encountered Baba alone, and Charles, my friend, stood there, and he just took in who this person in the chair was across the room, and he said, "Yes, he was God. Yes, this was Meher Baba, but this Meher Baba is not really his name. This presence I am with now is," he said, "the nameless one, the one for whom there is no name, because it's beyond any name you can give." But for his life on earth, he took this name. His name was actually Merwan Shariar Irani, but one of his early disciples began using the name Meher Baba, which means compassionate father, and that stuck. So, and we need a name to function on earth. So,
right.
But my friend had a dramatic experience. So really, the one working through Ram Dass, to say he was Meher Baba's helper, or I just felt that many times when I was with Ram Dass, I felt there's only a thin veil between him and God. He worked so purely. That was my experience, at least.
Wow. Well, and just the fact that you're sharing with the audience that experience, because when you're keeping all of that inside and that shame, it's just going to eat you up alive.
Yeah, that's right. And everybody knows that. Yeah.
Yeah. People know it, but they don't deal with it.
No, well, I know. And I couldn't, I feel in retrospect that God brought me through things that had been utterly impossible for me to even conceive of ever dealing with consciously. And I was led on this with God. You could only say, I don't know if God holding my hand, the impersonal God, maybe doesn't have a hand, but I was just being led through things that were utterly. Baba said, I actually have a sign right here to my desk. Through love, the impossible becomes possible.
Yes.
And that happened for me not once, but many times.
Yes.
And that's why I like to tell these stories when possible.
Yeah, I love it. Absolutely love it.
Mm-hmm.
So where can people find your music and any of your writings?
Let's see. That's maybe if you Google my name, Max Reif, Maxreif. The Mindful Word has a lot of my writings. I haven't for some reason I haven't been writing lately things to send to them, but they have many, many, many writings from 6 or 7 or 8 years. The online journal that I know another writer from there, Forrest Rivers, was also on here.
Yes.
And my music, I have a YouTube channel that has some of my songs on it.
Nice. What's your YouTube channel called?
I think it's just my name, Max Reif.
Okay.
Yeah. And I have books on Amazon. And I think my first CD is on Amazon, but it's not as professional as the second one. So I don't really promote that one too much. There's a website devoted to Meher Baba, a bookstore devoted to Meher Baba in Myrtle Beach called Shariar Books. And you can get my CD which is called Love's River, my recent CD, through them. That's SHERIARBOOKS.org.
Great.
Yeah.
Fantastic. So before we end the interview, Max, is there anything else that you want to share with the audience?
Well, I was going to actually my my intention was to share this experience of God, of my life being saved through art, through painting. But that's a whole other story. Maybe I'll just save it for another time. It's I still had another nervous, even though how can this be, having all this help from God and spiritual figures, and yet I still kept having nervous breakdowns, but I haven't had one in, I think, 35 years or 40 years or something like that. So it did help.
Yeah, for sure. Well, because, it's like peeling the layers of the onion.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah,
right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. And then, but in the last one, which was 1989, I ended up in a halfway house after somebody sort of drove me crazy. And I was stuck in the halfway house because it was supposed to be a therapeutic community, but the therapy they were telling you to do was just to hang out together in the recreation room after dinner. And so you're hanging out with all these other disturbed people. And, it was driving me more crazy. So one time on a bus, this was Staten Island, New York, where I was living, I stopped at an art store and bought some art supplies, and I hid them under my bed. And one night soon, I got the inspiration to slip away from this recreation room group smothering that we were, and slip back up to my room and spread out my materials on the floor and do a painting. And was almost like going into a trance. I went so deep. And then for every night I would do that for the next several months. And it was like in the end of it, 3 or 4 hours, I would see this beautiful painting in front of me, usually about 18 inches by 24 inches. That was the big pad of art paper that I had. And it showed me that whatever had happened with my external life, inside me, I was completely whole. And the art was so inspiring that, it brought me back to balance again. I was finally invited to put some of these paintings in a show in Hoboken, New Jersey. And then I entered the New York Art Students League, which is a wonderful art school, and spent about a year painting there. And just lately, I've been doing a lot of paintings. It's a wonderfully therapeutic and tool. More than therapy, it's just a way to share the divine gift that we all have, and also it can be helpful in working through our own stuff sometimes.
Oh, absolutely.
So I wanted to put in a plug for art, and I guess that's the last thing I need to say.
I love it. Actually, that's one of the things on my bucket list is to paint.
Yeah, and you can find my paintings and a lot of my writings too. I have a website that's called Faith of an Artist. The Faith of an Artist, and it's a Jim Doe. That's the company. It's an Australian company website. You can, and in combination with my name, you can find a lot of my paintings and writings on that website too.
Fantastic.
Okay.
Fantastic. Well, Max, this was such an amazing story, and I certainly learned so many things that I did not know about, and I've been taking notes. And we'll be heading on to Google as soon as this is over. So thank you so much for joining me today. Sandy. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, your voice was very friendly and inviting, and I felt completely comfortable with you.
Oh,
so thanks again.
You. Thank you. Take care.
Okay, you too. Bye-bye.
What an incredible journey Max has been on in his life. Wow. And I love toward the end of the interview when he was talking about shame and that we have to deal with this shame in our life and move it into the direction of love. So probably the best way to learn more about Max is to Google him, Max Reif, R-E-I-F. There will also be more information in the show notes. So thank you so much for joining today. You can learn more about me at sandyscarlotta.com. My book, Happiness Solved, Climbing 100 Steps, is available on Amazon and Barnes & Noble. And please follow me on Instagram and Facebook at Coach Sandy Scarlotta. As always, I hope that you and your family are safe and healthy and that your life is filled with peace, joy, happiness, and loads of love. Take care, everyone.